The stars had always called to humanity, and after 300 years among them, humans had earned their place in the galaxy. They were still young compared to the ancient species that ruled the Galactic Council, but they had proven themselves through hard work and kindness. When other species suffered, humans were always first to help. When disasters struck distant worlds, human ships arrived with medicine and food. This was their way. It had made them many friends. Admiral Catherine Cole stood on the bridge of the starship Resolute, watching the colors of hyperspace flow past the windows like a river of light. She was a woman of 53 years, her dark hair showing streaks of gray, her eyes sharp and wise from decades of service. She had commanded ships since she was 25 years old. She knew space better than she knew her own home on Earth. Beside her stood Commander Daniel Perry, her second in command. He was younger, perhaps 35, with calm brown eyes and a steady voice that never wavered even in crisis. Catherine trusted him completely. In the darkness between stars, trust was more valuable than gold. "The summons came 6 hours ago," Catherine said, not taking her eyes from the swirling colors outside. "The Council has called an emergency meeting. Every member species must attend. No exceptions." Daniel moved closer, his voice low. "Do we know why?" "No, that worries me." Catherine finally turned to face him. "But Ambassador Crixel sent me a private message. She told me to bring our full defensive escort." She seemed afraid. The Veluxi were an insectoid species, their bodies thin and delicate like glass sculptures given life. They were brilliant scientists and kind souls who had been humanity's first true friends in the Council. 200 years ago, a terrible plague had swept through their homeworld, killing millions. Human doctors had traveled across the galaxy to help, working day and night until they found a cure. The Veluxi had never forgotten this kindness. If Ambassador Crixel was worried, something was terribly wrong. The Resolute dropped out of hyperspace with a shudder, and the Council station appeared before them. It was a massive ring floating in the darkness, orbiting a dying red star. The station was ancient, built by species that had vanished from the galaxy long before humans learned to make fire. Now it served as the heart of galactic civilization, where representatives from hundreds of worlds came to make peace and law. Ships surrounded the station like insects around a flower. Catherine recognized vessels from dozens of species, the elegant silver needles of the Turani, the bulky cargo haulers of the Morvani, the crystalline spheres of the Kel. But her attention was drawn to one fleet in particular, the Dravani there. Ships were beautiful in a dangerous way, sleek and sharp, like the predators of old Earth oceans. The Dravani were the oldest and most powerful species in the Council. They had ruled the galaxy for 1,000,000 years, and they did not like to share power. Their scales were the color of midnight, their eyes burned like red stars, and their voices could make mountains tremble. "Daniel," Catherine said quietly, "look at the Dravani formation." Dravani ships had moved from their usual positions. Instead of floating in ceremonial patterns as they always did during council meetings, they had spread out around the human vessels. It was subtle, but Catherine had commanded ships in 3 wars. She knew a trap when she saw one. "That is not a welcome formation," Daniel said, his voice suddenly cold. "That is containment. They are surrounding us." Catherine's heart began to beat faster, but her face remained calm. A good commander never showed fear. Open a secure channel to Earth Command. Priority 1. Tell them something is wrong, and we may need emergency support. The communication officer worked quickly, her fingers dancing across the controls. But after a moment, she looked up with worry in her eyes. "Admiral, the channel is being blocked. I cannot reach Earth." Catherine felt ice form in her stomach. "Try the backup frequencies." "All of them." "I have tried, Admiral. They are all blocked. Someone is jamming our communications." Daniel stepped closer to Catherine, speaking so quietly that only she could hear. "This is a trap. We should leave now, while we still can." Catherine considered this. Every instinct told her to run, to take her ships and flee back to human space. But running would make them look guilty. Running would give their enemies exactly what they wanted. "No," she said firmly. We will attend the council meeting as ordered. Whatever is happening here, we will face it with our heads held high. Humanity does not run from shadows. She straightened her uniform and walked toward the shuttle bay, Daniel following close behind. 2 Marine guards joined them, their weapons ready, but not raised. Catherine wanted to show strength, not aggression. The shuttle ride to the station was quiet. Catherine watched through the small window as Dravani ships tracked their movement, weapons ports glowing faintly in the darkness. She thought about her daughter back on Earth, about the small house by the sea where she hoped to retire someday. She wondered if she would ever see it again. The shuttle docked and Catherine stepped onto the station. The air smelled of 1,000 different species, a mix of scents that was both strange and familiar. Council guards escorted them through winding corridors carved from living crystal, the walls pulsing with soft light. Other delegations passed them, and Catherine noticed something that made her blood run cold. They were staring, whispering. Some looked at her with fear, others with hatred. One more veiny diplomat actually stepped back as she passed, as if she carried some terrible disease. "They know something we do not," Daniel murmured. Catherine nodded but said nothing. Whatever was coming, she would face it as she had faced everything else in her life. With courage and dignity, the council chamber opened before them. A vast space that took her breath away no matter how many times she saw it. Crystal walls rose toward a ceiling lost in shadow. Tiered seats held representatives from over 200 species, their forms ranging from giants made of living stone to tiny creatures floating in special atmosphere bubbles. Catherine walked to the human platform, feeling every eye upon her. The chamber fell silent as she took her place. Even the constant hum of translation devices seemed to fade. Then High Arbiter Torvax rose from the central platform. He was ancient even by Dravani standards. His scales faded to pale gray, his movements slow but filled with terrible purpose. When he spoke, his voice rolled through the chamber like thunder. "This assembly has been called to address a grave threat to galactic peace." Catherine's hands tightened at her sides. "We have received evidence," Torvax continued, "that the human species has been conducting illegal weapons research. They have been building tools of mass destruction in secret, preparing for war against the council itself." The chamber erupted in noise. Shouts of anger and fear filled the air. Catherine stood frozen, unable to believe what she was hearing. This was impossible. This was madness. This was betrayal. The chaos in the council chamber continued for several minutes. Species that had been friendly to humanity now looked at Catherine with suspicion and fear. Others, those who had always resented human kindness and popularity, could not hide their satisfaction. The more veiny delegation was actually smiling. Catherine forced herself to remain calm. She had faced enemy fire. She had watched friends die in the darkness between stars. She had made decisions that cost lives. She would not break now. "What evidence?" she demanded, her voice cutting through the noise like a blade. "High Arbiter," Torvax raised one clawed hand, and silence fell immediately. The Dravani commanded respect that bordered on fear. When they spoke, others listened. 3 cycles ago, Dravani patrol ships discovered a hidden facility in a remote asteroid belt. The facility was manufacturing weapons of planetary destruction, bombs capable of destroying entire worlds. Torvax gestured, and a holographic display flickered to life above the chamber. Catherine watched as images appeared in the air. They showed a massive structure hidden among tumbling rocks, its design angular and industrial. Machines moved within, assembling devices that glowed with terrible energy. Technical specifications scrolled alongside the images, filled with numbers and formulas that made weapons scientists gasp. "The technology is unmistakably human," Torvax said. "The construction methods, the power signatures, even the warning labels are in human languages. There can be no doubt. Humanity has betrayed the trust of the Council." Catherine stepped forward, her boots echoing on the crystal floor. "This is a lie. Humanity has never built such weapons. We have never authorized any such facility. These images must be fabricated." The chamber exploded with noise again. Accusing the Dravani of lying was almost unheard of. They were the founders of the council, the keepers of galactic law. Their word had been trusted for 1,000,000 years. Counselor Veth of the Morvani rose from his seat. His flat gray face twisted with something like joy. You would accuse the Dravani of deception? Perhaps this is simply the true nature of your species. Violent, aggressive, you have always been too quick to fight, too eager to expand. We warned the council about accepting humans, but no one listened. Now we see the truth. Catherine wanted to shout, to defend her people, to expose this obvious conspiracy, but she knew that anger would only make things worse. She took a deep breath and spoke with forced calm. The Council Charter grants every accused species the right to investigate charges against them. We demand access to this supposed facility. We demand independent verification of this evidence. We demand justice. Torvax's ancient eyes fixed on her. There was something in his gaze that made Catherine's blood freeze. He had already decided. This trial, if it could be called a trial, was just performance. The evidence has been verified by Dravani scientists, Torvax said. The council has already voted. The decision is final. Catherine's heart stopped. You voted? Without hearing our defense? Without allowing us to speak? The threat was too urgent to allow delay. As of this moment, humanity is expelled from the Galactic Council. Your species is sentenced to containment within your home system. The soul barrier will be established immediately. Any human vessel found outside your system boundaries will be destroyed without warning. The words hit Catherine like physical blows. Expelled, contained, imprisoned. 300 years of friendship and cooperation erased in an instant. All the lives humans had saved, all the disasters they had helped prevent, all the bonds they had built, none of it mattered. Daniel grabbed her arm, his face pale. Admiral, our ships are reporting that the Dravani fleet is powering weapons. They are preparing to fire. Catherine looked across the chamber and found Ambassador Crixel. The Veluxi diplomat's compound eyes were wide with terror, her delicate limbs trembling. She made a small gesture with one hand, a movement so subtle that only Catherine noticed. Run, the gesture said. Run now. Catherine's training took over. She activated her communicator, not caring who heard. Resolute, this is Admiral Cole. Emergency extraction, authorization, Alpha 7. All human ships, break formation immediately and jump to emergency coordinates. Do not wait for confirmation. Go now. Dravani guards surged toward the human platform, their weapons raised. Catherine drew her sidearm, knowing it would do nothing against their armor, but refusing to surrender without a fight. You cannot escape, Torvax said, his voice carrying a hint of satisfaction. Our fleet surrounds your vessels. Surrender peacefully, and your people will be treated with mercy. Catherine laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the chamber. Mercy. You fabricated evidence to imprison an entire species. You condemned billions of innocent people without trial. If this is your mercy, I want no part of it. The first shots were fired outside. Through the crystal walls of the chamber, Catherine could see flashes of light as human ships engaged the Dravani blockade. Her people were fighting, dying, buying time for others to escape. Daniel pulled her toward a side corridor. We have to move. The shuttle bay is this way. They ran through winding passages, Dravani guards close behind. Catherine's lungs burned. Her legs ached, but she did not slow down. Behind her, she could hear weapons, fire, and shouting. A Veluxi appeared from a side passage, gesturing frantically. It was Ambassador Crixel herself, her thin body shaking with fear, but her eyes determined. This way, Crixel said, her voice a high-pitched buzz. There is a maintenance shuttle. The Dravani do not know about it. Quickly. Catherine grabbed the ambassador's arm. Come with us. They will punish you for helping us. Crixel shook her head. I must stay. Others are watching. Others must know the truth. The Veluxi will not abandon humanity. Now go. They reached the shuttle, a small vessel barely large enough for 4 people. Daniel took the controls, while Catherine watched through the rear window as Crixel disappeared back into the station. She wondered if she would ever see her friend again. the shuttle launched into chaos. Space around the Council Station had become a battlefield. Human ships were scattering in every direction, jumping to hyperspace whenever they could build enough speed. Dravani warships fired relentlessly, their weapons leaving trails of deadly light. Catherine saw the destroyer Courage take a direct hit, its hull splitting open like a broken egg. She saw the carrier Swift Justice managing to jump just before enemy missiles reached it. She saw acts of heroism and tragedy playing out across the darkness. "The Resolute is still fighting," Daniel reported. "They are covering the escape of civilian transports." "Get us to her," Catherine ordered. The shuttle weaved through the battle, dodging debris and weapons fire. Twice they came close to destruction, saved only by Daniel's skill and pure luck. Finally, they reached the Resolute and docked in her shuttle bay. Catherine ran to the bridge, taking command immediately. "Status report. 60% of our fleet has escaped," the tactical officer said. "The rest are still engaged or destroyed. We have lost 23 ships. 23 ships. Hundreds of lives." Catherine felt the weight of each death pressing down on her shoulders. "Plot a course for Sol," she said. "Best possible speed. We need to warn Earth." The Resolute jumped to hyperspace, leaving the battle behind. Catherine stood at the window, watching the stars blur into lines of light. Behind her, the Galactic Council had just declared war on humanity, and humanity had no idea. 3 months had passed since the betrayal, and Earth had never felt so small. Catherine Cole stood in the Situation Room beneath the White House, surrounded by the most powerful people in human civilization. President Marcus Grant sat at the head of the table, his face showing the exhaustion of sleepless nights and impossible decisions. General Laura Chen of Earth Defense Command stood near the holographic display, her uniform crisp but her eyes hollow. Dr. Samuel Hart, the brilliant scientist who led humanity's most secret research programs, paced nervously near the wall. The holographic display showed their prison. Thousands of alien ships formed a sphere around the Sol system, their weapons pointed inward. Nothing could enter. Nothing could leave. Humanity was trapped like an animal in a cage. 3 months, President Grant said, his voice heavy. 3 months since they locked us in here. 3 months since we lost contact with every colony outside this system. 20 billion humans, cut off from the rest of the galaxy. General Chen stepped forward. "Our intelligence teams have finally confirmed what we suspected. The evidence against us was completely fabricated. The Dravani built that weapons facility themselves, designed it to look human, then used it to justify our imprisonment." "But why?" Dr. Hart asked, stopping his pacing. "What do they gain from this?" "We were never a threat to them. We're becoming one," Catherine said. Everyone turned to look at her. "Not a military threat? Something worse." "We were becoming popular. When we joined the Council, most species ignored us. We were primitive, young, unimportant. But over 3 centuries, we changed that. We helped species that the Dravani wanted to keep weak. We pushed for reforms that threatened their power. We made friends with species that had been their servants for millennia." President Grant nodded slowly. "So they decided to remove us before we became too influential." Exactly. "The Dravani have ruled the galaxy for 1,000,000 years. They do not intend to share power with anyone, especially not with a species that believes in helping the weak and challenging injustice." General Chen pulled up new data on the holographic display. "We have analyzed the blockade. Their formation is tight, but not perfect. We have identified 17 potential breach points where a small force might be able to break through." "Can we fight our way out?" President Grant asked. "No." Chen's voice was flat, final. "If we threw everything we have at the blockade, we might destroy a few hundred ships. They have thousands. We would lose 90% of our fleet, and the survivors would be hunted down within days. A direct assault is suicide." The room fell silent. Catherine could feel the despair pressing down on everyone. 3 months of imprisonment had worn away hope. People were starting to believe that humanity would spend the rest of its existence trapped in this single system, slowly dying as resources ran out and populations grew too large. Dr. Hart cleared his throat. "There is another option. Something we have never told anyone outside this room, Everyone looked at him. The scientist was nervous, his hands shaking slightly, but his voice was steady. 20 years ago, we began a secret project called Lighthouse. We planted hundreds of communication beacons throughout the galaxy, disguised as derelict probes and space debris. These beacons use technology that the Council has never seen before. They can transmit messages faster than any known communication system, and the Dravani cannot block or intercept them. President Grant leaned forward. You were saying we can send messages outside the blockade? More than that. We can broadcast to every inhabited world in the galaxy simultaneously. Every species, every planet, every ship would receive our message at the same time. Catherine felt something stir in her chest. It was a feeling she had almost forgotten. Hope. What would we say? She asked. Dr. Hart looked at her. The truth. Everything we know about the Dravani conspiracy. The fabricated evidence, the illegal trial, the imprisonment of an innocent species. We would expose them to the entire galaxy. They will deny it, General Chen said. They will call us liars, criminals desperate to escape justice. Some will believe them, Catherine agreed. But not everyone. There are species out there who have suffered under Dravani rule. There are species who know that humanity has always been honest and helpful. If we can reach them, if we can show them the truth, we might be able to build an alliance. President Grant was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was stronger than it had been in weeks. It is not enough to just expose the conspiracy. We need to send a message that will inspire people, something that will make our allies believe in us again and make our enemies afraid. Catherine stepped toward the holographic display. Then we do not just tell them what happened. We tell them what is going to happen. We warn them that the blockade will fail. We promise them that humanity will escape. And we tell every species living under Dravani oppression that help is coming. That is a big promise, Dr. Hart said. Can we keep it? Catherine looked around the room. She saw exhausted people, frightened people, people who had watched their entire civilization be imprisoned in the span of a single day. But she also saw strength, determination, the same spirit that had carried humanity from caves to the stars. We have to, she said, because if we do not believe in ourselves, no one else will. President Grant stood up. Prepare the Lighthouse Network. I want a broadcast ready within 48 hours. Dr. Hart, work with Admiral Cole on the message. This will be the most important communication in human history. It needs to be perfect. The next 2 days were a blur of activity. Catherine worked around the clock, writing and rewriting the message until every word was exactly right. She consulted with linguists to ensure it would translate properly into hundreds of alien languages. She worked with psychologists to make sure it would inspire hope without sounding desperate. On the morning of the broadcast, Catherine stood in a small studio deep beneath the White House. Cameras pointed at her from every angle. Behind her, screens showed the Earth, beautiful and blue, imprisoned but unbroken. This is Admiral Catherine Cole of the United Earth Fleet, she began, her voice steady and clear. I am speaking on behalf of humanity to every species in the galaxy. The fabricated evidence. The illegal trial. The sentence passed without defense. She presented the proof that human scientists had gathered. Technical analysis that showed the weapons facility was built by Dravani engineers using Dravani methods. Then she spoke the words that would change history. To the species of the galaxy. I ask only this. Look at the evidence. Question what you have been told. Do not let fear blind you to injustice. To the Dravani and their allies, I give this warning. The blockade will fail. Humanity will escape. We have never been a threat to peace, but we will become one if you force us to fight for survival. To our friends across the stars, do not despair. We have not forgotten you. Help is coming. And to every species living under tyranny, to every world that has been told they are weak or worthless, escape. Break your chains. Run toward freedom. Because humanity is coming, and we will not stop until the galaxy is free. The message ended. The broadcast went out, and across 10,000 worlds. Everything began to change. The message traveled through space like a wave of fire, reaching every corner of the galaxy within hours. On worlds where humans had never set foot, screens flickered to life with Catherine Cole's face. On ships traveling between stars, communication systems suddenly interrupted their regular channels to deliver humanity's words. Even on the Council station itself, the broadcast appeared on every display. It's impossible to block or ignore. High Arbiter Torvax was in his private chambers when the message came. He watched it in silence, his ancient face showing no emotion. When it ended, he remained still for a long moment. Then he summoned his aide. "Contact every member of the Council," Torvax ordered. "Tell them this changes nothing. The evidence against humanity is solid. This broadcast is simply the desperate act of criminals trying to escape justice." But even as he spoke the words, Torvax knew that everything had changed. On the Veluxy homeworld, millions of citizens watched the broadcast together. They remembered the plague that had nearly destroyed their species. They remembered human doctors working until they collapsed from exhaustion, saving lives that the rest of the galaxy had written off as lost. When Catherine Cole finished speaking, the Veluxy did not cheer or celebrate. Instead, they began to organize. Ambassador Crixel had survived the events at the Council station. She had been questioned by Dravani's security, threatened with imprisonment, accused of helping humanity escape. But she had told them nothing useful, and eventually they had let her go. Now she stood before the Veluxy assembly, her thin body trembling with emotion, but her voice clear and strong. "We have always known the truth," Crixel said. "Humanity did not betray the Council. The Council betrayed humanity. The question now is what we will do about it." The assembly voted that night. 7 Veluxy delegates resigned from the Council in protest. Their ships began quietly moving toward positions that would be useful if war came. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. The Tyranni, a species of traitors who valued honesty above all else, analyzed the evidence that humanity had provided. Their computers confirmed what Catherine had claimed. The weapons facility showed signs of Dravani construction hidden beneath a thin layer of human technology. It was a clumsy forgery, obvious to anyone who looked closely. The Tyranni fleet, which had been preparing to support the blockade, quietly withdrew to neutral space. Their admiral sent a private message to the Dravani High Command. "We will not participate in injustice. Find other allies." Even species that had never been friendly to humanity began to question the Council's decision. The Kel, crystalline beings who communicated through light, had always found humans strange and difficult to understand. But they understood betrayal. They understood lies. And they did not like what they saw in the Dravani's actions. On 100 worlds, protests erupted. Citizens demanded answers. Governments that had supported the blockade found themselves facing angry crowds. The careful order that the Dravani had maintained for 1,000,000 years began to crack. The Dravani responded with force. Their ships attacked a Tyranni convoy, claiming it was carrying weapons to human rebels. They arrested Veluxy diplomats, accusing them of espionage. They sent threatening messages to any species that questioned the Council's decision. But fear was no longer enough. The galaxy had seen the truth, and it could not unsee it. Inside the Sol system, humanity watched these events unfold through the Lighthouse network. For the first time in months, there was hope. Catherine Cole stood on the bridge of the Resolute, reviewing reports from across the galaxy. Every day brought news of another species questioning the blockade, another government withdrawing support, another crack in the wall that imprisoned her people. "It is working," Daniel Perry said, standing beside her. "The alliance against us is falling apart." "It's not fast enough," Catherine replied. "The Dravani still have enough ships to maintain the blockade. And every day we stay trapped here, we grow weaker. Our supplies are running low. People are losing hope, and we need to do something dramatic. Something that proves humanity is not defeated." Catherine nodded slowly. An idea had been forming in her mind for weeks, growing clearer with each passing day. It was dangerous, almost insane. But desperate times required desperate measures. "I need to speak with the president," she said. 2 days later, a plan was in place. They called it Operation Exodus. The strategy was complex, but built on a simple idea: make the enemy look everywhere while striking where they were weakest. A small fleet would attack one point of the blockade, drawing Dravani's attention with noise and fury. Meanwhile, the main force would punch through a different section. One that intelligence suggested was guarded by unreliable allies. But the real key to the plan was not military. It was diplomatic. For weeks, human agents had been communicating through the Lighthouse network with sympathetic species. The Veluxi had secretly placed ships among the blockade forces, disguised as loyal council vessels. The Turani had provided detailed information about Dravani patrol patterns and communication frequencies. Even some Morvani, disgusted by their own government's behavior, had agreed to help. When the attack came, it would not be humanity alone against the galaxy. It would be the first battle of a new alliance, a coalition of species united by a shared belief in justice and freedom. The night before the operation, Catherine walked through the corridors of the Resolute. She spoke with crew members, shaking hands, sharing words of encouragement. Many of them would not survive the sea-oming battle. She owed them the respect of looking them in the eye, in the engine room. She found Chief Engineer Tommy Blake working on the power systems. He was a young man, barely 20, but he had kept the Resolute running through 3 months of imprisonment when replacement parts were impossible to find. "How are the engines?" Catherine asked. Tommy smiled, though there was fear in his eyes. "Ready to fly, Admiral? I squeezed every last bit of power out of them. When you give the order, this ship will move faster than she ever has before." "Good. We are going to need it." She moved on, visiting the medical bay, where Dr. Lisa Park was preparing for casualties. She visited the weapons stations where gunners were checking their systems one last time. She visited the fighter bay where pilots were saying goodbye to each other, knowing that some of them would not return. Finally, she returned to the bridge. Daniel was waiting along with the senior officers. "All ships report ready," Daniel said. "The diversionary fleet is in position. Main assault force standing by. Our allies have confirmed their participation." Catherine looked at the holographic display showing the blockade. Thousands of enemy ships, any one of which could destroy the Resolute. Behind them, millions of stars, each one representing freedom that had been stolen from humanity. She thought about her daughter on Earth, about the promise she had made years ago to always come home. She thought about the billions of humans counting on her to set them free. She thought about the species across the galaxy who were watching, waiting to see if humanity would keep its promises. "Signal all ships," Catherine said. "Operation Exodus begins at dawn." She sat down in the command chair and waited for the sun to rise on the longest day of her life. The battle began in silence. In the depths of space, there is no sound. No roar of engines, no thunder of weapons, no screams of the dying. There is only light and darkness, life and death, victory and defeat. Admiral Catherine Cole watched from the bridge of the Resolute. As the diversionary fleet launched its attack, 30 ships, all volunteers, raced toward the blockade at maximum speed. Their engines burned so hot that they glowed like small suns. It's impossible to ignore. The Dravani responded exactly as Catherine had hoped. Hundreds of warships turned toward the attack, their weapons charging with deadly energy. Communications channels filled with orders and confusion as commanders tried to coordinate their response. "Now," Catherine said softly, "signal the main fleet. All ships, full speed ahead." The Resolute surged forward, leading a formation of over 200 human vessels. They were heading for a section of the blockade, guarded not by the Dravani themselves, but by Morvani auxiliary ships. Intelligence suggested that many Morvani crews had been shaken by the evidence humanity had presented. They might hesitate. That hesitation would be the difference between life and death. Space around them erupted with light. The diversionary fleet was engaging the enemy, their weapons firing continuously, even though they were hopelessly outnumbered. Catherine saw one ship, the destroyer Relentless, take a direct hit that tore off its entire rear section. Instead of retreating, the crippled vessel continued forward, ramming into a Dravani cruiser and destroying them both. "Heroes," Daniel murmured beside her. "Every one of them." The main fleet reached the Morvani line. For one terrible moment, Catherine thought they would have to fight their way through. The Morvani ships had their weapons locked on the human vessels, ready to fire. Then something unexpected happened. 3 more Vanny captains opened channels to the human fleet. Their faces appeared on Catherine's screen, gray and flat, but filled with something she had never seen in Morvani eyes before. Shame. "We will not fire," the lead captain said. "We will not participate in this injustice any longer. Pass through in peace." Catherine felt tears in her eyes, though she blinked them away quickly. "Thank you. Your courage will be remembered." The Morvani ships moved aside, creating a gap in the blockade. Human vessels poured through, their engines straining as they raced for open space. But the Dravani had noticed. Their IPs were turning, abandoning the diversionary fleet to chase the escaping humans. Weapons fire began to flash around the Resolute, close enough to shake the ship with near misses. "We need more time," Catherine said. "Signal our allies. Now." Across the blockade, ships that had been pretending to be loyal suddenly revealed their true colors. 3 Veluxi science vessels dropped their disguises and began broadcasting jamming signals that turned Dravani communications into chaos. Tirani merchantmen, their cargo holds secretly modified to carry weapons, opened fire on their former allies. The blockade dissolved into confusion. Ships fired on each other by accident. Commanders screamed orders that no one could hear. The careful formation that had imprisoned humanity for 9 months fell apart in minutes. The Resolute punched through into open space. Followed by ship after ship, Catherine watched the numbers on her tactical display climb. 50 vessels free, then 100, then 150. Behind them, the battle continued to rage, but humanity was escaping. "Coordinates locked in," Daniel reported. "We can go to hyperspace in 30 seconds. Catherine shook her head. "No, we are not leaving yet, Admiral." She pointed at the display. Among the escaping vessels were dozens of civilian ships, transports carrying families, cargo haulers loaded with refugees, small personal craft that had no business being in a battle zone. They were slower than the military vessels, falling behind, vulnerable. "We are not leaving anyone behind," Catherine said. "All warships form a defensive line. Protect the civilians while they escape." The Resolute turned around, facing the pursuing Dravani fleet. Other human warships joined her, forming a wall between the enemy and the helpless civilian vessels. The next hour was the longest of Catherine's life. Dravani ships attacked in waves, their weapons tearing through space with deadly precision. Human ships fell, one after another, their crews sacrificing themselves so that others could escape. The destroyer Defiant went down fighting, its captain refusing to abandon ship even as flames consumed the bridge. The cruiser Horizon took a dozen hits before finally breaking apart, its escape pods launching just seconds before the reactor exploded. The escort carrier Dawn took so much damage that it could no longer move. But its fighter pilots continued to launch and fight until the very end. But for every human ship that fell, 10 civilian vessels escaped to hyperspace. Families who had been prisoners for 9 months finally saw freedom. Children who had never known anything but the blockade watched the stars blur into lines of light as they jumped to safety. Finally, the last transport was through. Catherine looked at her tactical display and felt her heart break. Of the 200 warships that had begun the battle, fewer than 60 remained. Thousands of sailors had given their lives for this moment. "All remaining ships," she said, her voice hoarse with emotion, jumped to hyperspace. "Rendezvous at the emergency coordinates." The Resolute jumped, leaving the battlefield behind. When they emerged from hyperspace, Catherine found herself surrounded by the largest gathering of ships she had ever seen. Human vessels mixed with Veluxi cruisers, Tirani freighters, Kel crystalline spheres, dozens of other designs she did not recognize. Species from across the galaxy had come, drawn by humanity's broadcast, inspired by their courage. United by a shared hatred of tyranny, a message arrived from Ambassador Crixel, who had escaped the council station and now commanded the Veluxi contingent. "Welcome to freedom, Admiral Cole. You kept your promise. Now we will keep ours." Over the following days, more ships arrived. More species pledged their support. What had begun as a desperate escape became the foundation of something much larger, an alliance of free peoples, united against Dravani oppression. High Arbiter Torvax watched these developments from his flagship. Still floating near the ruins of the blockade, his aide approached nervously. High Arbiter, the Council is demanding a report. What should we tell them? Torvax was silent for a long moment. He had ruled the galaxy for longer than most species had existed. He had crushed rebellions, destroyed civilizations, maintained order through fear and force. But he had never faced anything like this. Tell them the truth, he finally said. Tell them that humanity has escaped. Tell them that our blockade has failed. Tell them that the galaxy is changing and we must change with it or be swept away. What should we do now? Torvax turned to face the stars, his ancient eyes reflecting their distant light. Prepare for war. Not the kind of war we have fought before with overwhelming force against weak enemies. This will be different. This will be a war of ideas, of inspiration, of hope against fear, and I am not certain we can win. 1 year later, Admiral Catherine Cole stood on the bridge of the flagship Liberty, the largest vessel humanity had ever built. Around her, an allied fleet stretched to the horizon, thousands of ships from dozens of species, all flying together toward a common purpose. They were heading to the Council Station, but not as prisoners or refugees. They were coming as liberators, bringing with them a new vision for the galaxy, one where species were judged by their actions rather than their age, where the weak were protected rather than exploited, where freedom was a right rather than a privilege. Daniel Perry stood beside her. Older now, his hair showing traces of gray. He had been promoted to captain of his own ship, but he had asked to be on the Liberty for this moment. The Council has agreed to negotiate, he said. They want to discuss terms for a new order. Catherine nodded. She thought about all the sacrifices that had brought them to this point. The ships destroyed, the lives lost, the years of struggle and hope. She thought about the species that had risked everything to help humanity, the species that would benefit from the changes they were fighting for. We will talk, she said, but we will not compromise on what matters. Freedom is not negotiable. Justice is not optional. Every species in this galaxy deserves the right to determine their own future. The fleet jumped to hyperspace, carrying with them the hopes of 1 billion worlds. Humanity had been betrayed, imprisoned, written off as defeated, but they had refused to surrender. They had fought back with courage and creativity, inspiring others to join them. Building an alliance that the Dravani could not defeat, they had warned the galaxy to escape. And the galaxy had listened. Now, it was time to build something better. The stars waited. Full of possibility, and humanity was finally free to explore them once again.